Alright, today I'll be talking to you about God's provision, how God provides for us. And last week I talked to you a little bit about times get tough, which they may. Some people believe that we're heading into the end times. It seems like every pastor, all the years I've been Christian, has told us the end times are coming soon. Sometimes they create an expectation and then it doesn't quite happen. We don't really know for sure when Christ is coming back. Could be in our lifetimes, or could be 1,000 years from now. But the way things are going in the world today can be very frightening. And we see a lot coming against us in the world today. And I just want to talk to you just briefly about our proper response to what's happening in the world. If the world comes against us, if the day comes where we're actually physically persecuted, there's a response that we should all have. And that is to follow Jesus even more closely. The response is to become more like Jesus. The response is not to become bitter. The response is not to become angry or fight back and be vengeful. The response is to be more like Jesus. I want to read you a couple verses that tell us what that means. Galatians 5, 22 and 23. I might do a little reading, so I might need some help. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, and faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. The Apostle Paul wrote that. It's funny he says against such things there is no law, because there were laws made against Christianity in the early days. In fact, the first 300 years of Christianity, there was persecution after persecution after persecution. People had their children taken away because the government didn't think that they were raising their children properly. If they were raising them to be Christians, it would take their children away. And we all know the stories about the Colosseums and the lions, and how the lions were eating all the prophets. Not literally. But he says here, against these things there is no law. People can make any law they want. They make a law that you can't assemble together. They can make a law that you can't worship. They can make a law that you can't have a Bible. And in many countries right now in the world, those are laws. And over the centuries, there have been many places where those were the laws. But the Apostle Paul here says, no matter what the laws are, here's what you can do. Here's what you can respond. And let me read that response again. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Nobody can make a law that we can't have these attributes. These are the attributes of Jesus. And when things get bad in the world, or if they get bad, or if they get worse, we've got to make our response not anger, not hitting back, not name-calling, not the use of vulgar language, but love, patience, kindness, and goodness. We need to become more like Jesus. And the worse things get, the quicker we need to go about it. Get our butts in gear and become more like Jesus. I'll read you just a couple more places that tell us similar things. So I want you to understand this isn't just one little verse in the Bible, but this is the teaching of the Bible, cover to cover, how we are to live our lives. Now some of you, when you get married, you might hear a quote from 1 Corinthians chapter 13. 1 Corinthians chapter 13 is called the love chapter. Now let me say what that says about love. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. So that's how we should be. That's how we should react. Let me pull one more verse for you. We said the Lord's Prayer today. And the Lord's Prayer comes from a sermon that Jesus preached. And in this sermon, he had a part called the Beatitudes. You should kind of remember this as Matthew chapter 5, the Beatitudes, the blesseds. And Jesus opened his mouth, and Jesus taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you, and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you." That's our response to whatever goes wrong in the world. And I want you to remember that. So many churches and pastors are often just ranting and railing against political leaders they don't like, or things going on in the media they don't like, or things in the world they don't like. Jesus taught us to be meek and humble and kind at all times. We want our words to be kind as well. Now let me talk to you about God's provision. That was just a little pre-sermon there. There's a story in 1 Kings chapter 17 about the prophet Elijah. The prophet Elijah is one of the greatest prophets who ever lived. You know, there weren't a lot of people in the Bible that could do miracles, as far as just laying on hands and healing people, bringing the dead back to life, or all kinds of miracles. But Elijah was one of the few in the Bible that could do those kind of miracles. He was a powerful prophet, and he was being persecuted. He had to run away and hide in a cave and live there, away from the city, so he would not be killed. But while Elijah was there, how was he going to feed himself? How was he going to live? How was Elijah going to survive? Well, God took care of him. And listen how he did it. The word of the Lord came to Elijah. "Leave here and go east, and hide in the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have directed the ravens to supply you with food." The ravens, the birds, are going to supply you with food. So he did what the Lord told him. He went to the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan, and he stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. How many of you have ever had the ravens come to provide what you need? I know through my life, the ravens have always been sent by God when I needed them most. Now, there was quite a few years of my adult life where I lived in poverty, and it was kind of, I wouldn't say I chose it exactly, but it was where my head was at the time, and I was happy. I was fine not having any money or house or whatever. And sometimes I'd live in my van, and sometimes I'd rent a cheap apartment, but I was very, very low income. Didn't have credit cards or bank accounts and things like that most of the time. One day I was driving home. Well, I went to Georgia with my girlfriend. Separate cars. She went up first, I had to work. And we kind of got a little argument, and I had to head home. So I'm driving home, and I realized I don't have any money. No debit card, no credit card, almost no cash. And I realized I was getting out of gas, like very soon gonna be out of gas, on empty. So I pulled over on the side of the road. I had a little pickup truck, went around the back, put the back down, sat up in there, started playing my guitar. It wasn't like 5 minutes, somebody pulls over. "You need some help?" I'm like, "Yeah, I actually do." So he went to the nearest exit with me, followed me, and he filled my car up with gas. So God sent a raven to me. I don't know if I knew he was a raven, but he was. And he got me home back to Florida from Georgia. course, after I would have done this anyway, but been many times where I filled someone's gas tank up with gas since then, right? Because whatever God does, we try to pass it on. We try to pass on the goodness that He blesses us with. So just think about those ravens. Now I want to read you something from Luke. Well, I gotta read you a little passage here. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." You know, people are always fighting over inheritance, aren't they? And they thought Jesus was going to kind of like be the judge and tell them who gets what. But Jesus said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And He said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness. For one's life does not exist in the abundance of his possessions." And He told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentiful. And the rich man thought to himself, 'What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' And he said, 'I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and all my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry.'" Sounds like a lot of us, doesn't it? I know a lot of my gigs that I play are at private communities, like Citrus Hills Country Club. I played there last night. Top of the World community over in Ocala. And when I'm playing, I just look at these people and I think of this verse. They're dedicated their whole life to eat, drink, and be merry. Sort of like in the villages, you know. And I look at them and I think, are they doing right? Is this okay? But some of them I know are also doing charity work. One of our friends teaches, does tutoring with kids and goes to nursing homes and plays music. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not serving God in those situations. But I just think about this. Eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, "You fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose shall they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God." So it's not wrong to have treasure, but it's wrong to have treasure and not be rich toward God. I kind of like that. This story started off with someone in the crowd said, "Teacher, help me divide up my inheritance. Help me to get my inheritance." And at the end, he leaves it with, "This night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be?" Kind of started and ended with inheritance. Now here, listen to this next part. This is how God teaches us. And you know, in the years that I lived in poverty, I had so many experiences. And I can't tell you how God took care of me. Amen. It was crazy. It was crazy the things I went through. And even my wife doesn't know the half of it. I don't want to bore her too many of my stories. I was at one point, I was living in a tent. The car I had broke down. I was in a tent in Alabama. And I got a call from my baby's mama. She goes, "Something's going on up here. We can't take care of your daughter anymore. You've got to come get her right now." So I pawned my guitar, about the only thing I had left, got a plane ticket. She was in 4th grade, flew her down to Alabama. I'm living in a tent. I'm out in a field that I'm paying $5 a day to stay there. And when she arrived, and we got her there, back there to the campground, I counted my money. I had $1. I had $1 and an 8-year-old girl, and I was in the tent. And making a long story short, 5 weeks later we were in an apartment. I bicycled her to school. I bicycled 12 miles to work. I worked really hard. I almost gave up, but I didn't. And God took care of us. He sent the ravens when we needed them the most. So here's the next part of this story that Jesus was preaching and the parables he was telling. Jesus said to his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat, nor about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body is more than clothing. Consider the ravens." Hey, Jesus brings up the ravens again. This is like 700 years later. Jesus is talking about the ravens again. "Consider the ravens. They don't sow and they don't reap. They have neither storehouses nor barns, yet God feeds them. How much more valuable are you than the birds?" So the birds were used to feed Elijah. Now God's telling us he's going to take care of the birds. You know, you can't give away too much. I think last year we gave away more than any other year. We gave away a lot last year. Sometimes when you're a pastor, you want to tell people your own example of what you're doing so they can follow and know you're not being a hypocrite. And I don't want to do that because I also don't want to be bragging or showing off about things. But we did give away an awful lot last year. A shocking amount. But at the end of the year, we increased our savings account by more than any year before. So God still sends the ravens. When I lived in poverty, God sent the ravens. Now that I'm a middle-class person and I have a beautiful wife, God still sends the ravens. And God takes care of us. When we act as a raven to help others, we give away and we take care of others and help others, God just sends that blessing right back on us, right? Consider the lilies. They do not grow or toil or spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God clothes the grass, which is alive in the field today and tomorrow is thrown to the oven, how much more will he clothe you? O ye of little faith, do not seek what you are to eat and what you are to drink, nor be worried. For all the nations of the world seek after these things. Your Father knows that you need them. Instead, seek his kingdom, and these things will be added to you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the needy. Woo! Provide yourself with money bags that do not grow old, with a treasure in heaven that does not fail, where no thief approaches, no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Boy, the scriptures I'm reading today, they're so demanding. They're so extreme. But this is the life that Jesus calls us to. If you ever doubt that, just open your Bible, start reading the red letters. Read the words of Jesus. Our response to everything in life is to become more like Jesus. We've got to depend on him for everything. You know, whatever you've got, whatever security you have. I have friends that have retirement pay coming in, and they have Social Security coming in. And maybe they've got some savings. Maybe they got a house that's paid for. It sounds very secure. But just like the story of the rich man that we read, this day your soul is required of you. We never know when we're going to leave this world. We never know when sickness could strike. We never know when a financial loss could happen. But if our faith is in God and we're trusting in God, he's always going to take care of us. And it sounds a little crazy, but I can tell you this. God's never let me down. He's never let me down. The one day I thought I was going to miss a meal. The one day in my crazy life that I thought I was going to miss a meal. I'm walking down a street in Tampa. Didn't know very many people over there. Walking down the street, and I'm kind of hungry, and I have no money. I'm like, God, what am I going to do? I'm hungry. You know, I love my food. A little too much. My dad came driving by in his car. And he says, hey, what are you doing? Let's go get some lunch. All right, thanks, Dad. So I almost missed a meal once in my life, but I never have missed a meal in my life. And I've always had some kind of roof over my head, whether it was a van or someone's porch or spare room or whatever it was, couch. I've always had a roof over my head. And I thank God for that. So I hope today you're being challenged to rely not on yourself, but rely on God, to make sure your treasure is in heaven. Be generous with your money. Be kind to others. And your response to anything in the life should be more like Jesus. So what's our response to anything in life? To be more like Jesus. Keep that in mind. Don't go down that path of anger and meanness. Stay on the path of love, kindness, and forgiving. Anybody here today has never received Christ?